On today's show, we break down 6 of the highest risers in the 2024 NHL Draft class.
You are Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, and welcome back to Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. On this show, we break down everything prospects related for you 5 days a week, Monday through Friday. I'm Sebastian Hyde, the head scout over at Dobber Prospects. I'm typically joined by Hattie Kalakash, the director of North American Scouting at Dobber Prospects as well. But this week, we only have some solo episodes for you in store due to scheduling issues. But nonetheless, we have a very exciting episode today as we're looking at 6 of the biggest risers eligible on draft day, which is coming up really soon. We are both going to be at the draft in Vegas, and we'll be bringing content to you from the draft floor when that arrives. But before we jump straight into the episode here, this episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 if your team wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. Alrighty, so the way that we're going to do this episode today is that we're going to look at 2 players per segment that are very big risers, starting off with some players that might go as high as like 4th or 5th overall on draft day, and also be throwing in some potential team fits in terms of NHL organizations that would value the type of tools and habits that these players bring to the equations, and also bring some value in what that team needs, whether it be in their prospect pool specifically or at the NHL level. Starting off with a very big name here, Tij Iginla. He's been rising up draft boards all season long, and he's well inside my personal top 5 at this stage of the draft cycle. I'm a massive fan of this player, and he was very much ranked in like the mid to late teens, in the 20s, sometimes not even in the first round at the very early stages of the draft cycle. But he will be a top 10 selection on draft day. You can take my word for it. He is a high intensity, high IQ, high toolsy type of forward who can play either on the wing or down the middle. He's a 6-foot, 185-pound left shot forward who scored 47 goals and 84 points through 64 games with the Kelowna Rockets in the WHL this season. And he's a late riser for a whole bunch of reasons. He is a tremendously versatile offensive player. He can play a variety of roles. He can be a finisher. He can be a play driver. He can be a playmaker. He can be a checking forward. He's excellent in board battles. He's great at the net front. He plays a lot bigger than he is in his frame. He's one of the youngest players eligible in this draft class. It's an August 1st, 06 birthday, just like a month and a half before the cutoff. And his development trajectory is absolutely skyrocketing. He played last season as a D-1 with the Seattle Thunderbirds in the WHL, which was an absolutely stacked team, and he was exclusively playing bottom 6 minutes, and the production reflected that. In that season, he scored 6 goals and 18 points through 48 games, which is not fantastic in terms of raw production, but the time on ice was certainly a huge factor in that. But he got traded to Kelowna in the offseason and has absolutely thrived there. At first playing, like being really tied at the hip with Andrew Crystal, but in the back half of the season, he was entrusted with driving play on his own on a line, separated from Crystal, and that's where he truly took off and thrived. He's at his best in the playoffs. He was dominant at the U18 World Championships for Team Canada on their route to the gold medal victory. Also bumped his way up the lineup over the course of that tournament, starting off in the 3rd line, finishing off playing exclusively top 6 minutes. And a very promising player in terms of that trajectory. He's also very projectable in how he plays the game. He's super adaptable. He plays well under pressure. He likes to get initiated physically. So much that NHL teams are really big fans of. And the lineage is not a detractor whatsoever either with his NHL projection or his draft stock. In terms of team fits here, we're exclusively looking at top 10 selections here. And the three teams that I'm looking at for Tij Iginla are the Columbus Blue Jackets at fourth overall, the Montreal Canadiens at fifth overall, and the Calgary Flames at ninth. The Blue Jackets could really use a versatile, a potential line drive, but also complementary piece to get tied to the hip of Adam Fantilli. Those would be two very, very complementary players to put together in what they bring, the pace with which they play, the intelligence with which they play, and their adaptability in doing just about everything in the offensive zone for both of them. Iginla also has some higher defensive upside than Fantilli does. He has a really high motor defensively, but the actual defensive habits and the intricacies of it could still use a decent amount of refining. With the Montreal Canadiens, the Habs absolutely adore players that can bring this type of grit and character and tools and just that intensity and desire to get implicated on every single shift in all three zones. Being versatile, whether it be goal scoring or play driving, puck handling, can do a bit of everything and really complement any line and facilitate Martin St. Louis' job in terms of line mixing and just being a raw playoff performer. The Habs love these types of players. Do not be shocked if Tij Iginla is the pick at number 5. And last but not least, I do not think that Tij Iginla falls anywhere further than 9th overall, where the Calgary Flames are selecting. I'd be a little bit surprised if you got that far at all, but if he's available at 9th overall, you can bet a bunch of money that he's going to be the selection there for the Calgary Flames. Do not even need to begin with the Jerome Iginla, Tij Iginla, obviously, but also just what the organization values, what they like in players and prospects specifically. They went out and selected Samuel Honzek in the WHL last season, another refined, toolsy, gritty player that can really get involved physically, but has a good amount of soft skill as well, really good shot. I think the Flames would be an excellent fit for Tij Iginla if he makes it that far. And next up, we have Beckett Sennecke, another massive late riser, a really skilled player who is still very raw. There's a ton of runway with this guy, and he's grown about 6 inches in the last year and a half, and he's still getting used to his bigger frame. He's up to like 6'2", 6'3" at this point, 181 pounds. He's a right shot right winger playing for the Oshawa Generals in the OHL, and this season he scored 27 goals and 68 points through 63 regular season appearances, but it was in the playoffs where he truly took off, scoring 10 goals and 22 points in 16 games, bringing Oshawa to the OHL finals, but which he unfortunately missed to injury, and Oshawa really, really missed what he brought to the game. Sennecke is a player who is very improvisational in his offensive engagement. He loves to use his high-end handling ability, his power game, his mobility to just absolutely dissect defenses. And it's very much down to his high-end processing ability. He processes the game super quickly, very creative. He can find small holes, small soft spaces of ice in the offensive zone to make something happen. The actual incremental building of play through his teammates is something that could still use a little bit of work, but he brings a ton of grit, a ton of intensity, a true power forward in how he approaches the game of hockey. And that's only going to improve as he gets more and more comfortable in his big frame. Another playoff performer, as I mentioned, and there's a lot to like in this player. I'm not quite sure where he ends up going on draft day, though, because there's a wide range of possibilities, especially because he is such a late riser. He's not a player that was really in the top 10 conversation up until about a month and a half ago for most public outlets and fans. But I could see the Montreal Canadiens at 5 being another fit there. Again, he brings so much upside, but also grit and character and power to the game. The combination of upside with all those other habits and details is something that Canadians absolutely adore. Next up, the Ottawa Senators, I think, could also be a fantastic fit at 7th overall. Beckett Sennecke certainly fits their mold of skill plus intensity plus physicality, and also gives them a lot of upside to kind of wait on. I think that the Sens could certainly use another influx of high-end talent in the organization to take that next step, especially with a brand new coaching staff now. But yeah, I think he'd be a fantastic fit in Ottawa. I think the fans would absolutely adore him. I think playing with Tim Stützle would be a fantastic combination and would be a lot of fun to really watch just from a hockey fan standpoint. But lastly, if he falls to 14th overall, I think the San Jose Sharks are making that swing. He brings so much upside. He fits into their core so great. They have a lot of players that are a bit undersized with a ton of skill offensively. I would think the game at a high level, but could use some of that size to insulate them and to do some of that dirty work in the offensive zone. And Beckett Sennecke brings that on top of that upside and that creativity and that skill. And if you can add Macklin Celebrini and Beckett Sennecke in one draft class, that is something that you just need to do if it is an option. In the next segment, we're going to look at two defensemen that are rising up draft boards in slightly different ways here late in the cycle in Stian Solberg and Sam Dickinson. But first, a quick word from our sponsors over at FanDuel. It's winner-take-all time now in the NBA and NHL, and FanDuel's giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 if your team wins. And you can spend that on anything, ranging from spreads to player props to over and unders and even same-game parlays, which are my personal favorites, especially for the Stanley Cup Finals, and even more so if you're lucky enough to attend one of those Cup final games live. It makes the action all the more exciting. You can hand select a couple stats that you want to hedge your bets on, and just up the excitement even more if your heart can take it, because the Stanley Cup Finals is what it is all about. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make every playoff shot count. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Alrighty, let's kick off the second segment here with Stian Solberg, the Norwegian heavy-hitting left shot defenseman who is going to go in the first round come NHL Draft Day. He's a 6'2", 201-pound left shot D, December 29th, 05 birthday, and he was ranked almost exclusively in the second round for most of this draft cycle, but is really ramping up his draft stock and is being ranked around 20th by a lot of outlets at this stage. I know us over at Dobber Prospects are going to bump him up our draft rankings a decent amount for our final rankings. I went back and watched a decent amount of draft tape for him between his international games and his league tape in the Norwegian Pro League, and he is just so much fun. He combines high upside and high floor. He's a fantastic skater in all four directions, and he's constantly throwing hits, but he doesn't chase hits in a really brainless way. It's very strategic with when he steps up to defend the blue line. He's a fantastic rush defender. He uses his stick really well as well. He played for Vålerenga in the Norwegian Pro League this season, logging 5 goals and 15 points in 42 games. And as a 17, 18-year-old, he was playing 25 minutes a night against pro competition. And it's not the strongest pro league in the world by any stretch of the imagination, but that is still really impressive regardless. And he's been at his best internationally, whether it be at the World Junior Championships back in December and January, where he was logging like 30 minutes a night for Team Norway and scored a really nice goal there as well, showcasing some of the upside he had as a puck handler, which is a really, really interesting part of his toolkit, which still has a lot of runway and room to grow. Or at the World Championships for Norway, where he scored 2 goals and 3 points in 7 games with the men against some really, really good competition. Stian Solberg brings so much to the equation that NHL teams adore, whether it be upping his value in those big games when it matters most, whether it be the combination of physicality, defensive stability, and mobility that is just like the sweet spot for those like two-way defensemen at the NHL level, or even that upside he has as an on-puck player. The passing game, the breakout, is still a little bit hesitant. There's a little bit of panic under pressure, but he's a really good puck handler, and he's had some flashes of puck rushes up the ice through all 3 zones, and even scoring goals at the end of it. And there's a real interesting prospect here with Stian Solberg, and he could be a top four, fantastically entertaining defenseman, fan favorite type of player, and I think a lot of teams will be very interested on draft day. A couple of teams that come to mind pretty quickly are the St. Louis Blues at 16th overall. They love their mobile, aggressive, intelligent defensemen who might not put up the most points in the world, but are certainly going to be trusted by their coaches to play big, important minutes in all situations. Maybe even on the second power play. The Vegas Golden Knights at 19th would be another really nice fit. The Golden Knights love selecting players that have a high trade value on top of being promising prospects. And I mean, they trade away most of the prospects they select, but Stolberg might be a player they actually hold on to. But if they do want to trade him, he's the type of player who could really up his trade value by a decent amount in the next year or two, because he's going over to the SHL next season with Färjestad, and that is going to be a podium where he could really, really raise his stock. And I think that Vegas would be very interested. And next up, the Toronto Maple Leafs. If he's available at 23rd overall, I think he'd be a really easy pick for the Leafs to make. They've been very vocal about their desire to infuse their lineup and pipeline with physicality and defensive ability in that playoff style of game. And Solberg brings all of that on top of the on-puck upside, which the organization has also historically valued. So that would be a really nice balance. So if he's available at 23, I think he'd be a fantastic pick. Next, Sam Dickinson. Bit of a different riser. He's not the type of guy that was being ranked in the second round or anything over the course of this season, but he has been ranked in that 12 to 15 range by a decent amount of outlets, typically around 10th overall. But I really do believe that his OHL playoff run and his Memorial Cup performances for the London Knights in the OHL is going to raise his draft stock enough to be picked well inside the top 10 on draft day. He's a 6'3", 194-pound left shot defenseman. He's young for the draft class as well, as a June 7th, 06 birthday. And he put up fantastic numbers in the OHL, playing mainly second pairing minutes with an even strength and on the power play. He scored 18 goals and 70 points regardless as a 17-year-old throughout the entire draft cycle. And there's so much to like here. He's a fantastic rush defender. He's very aggressive. He plays with physicality. Very mobile type of player. The type of guy that you just want as your number 2 or number 3 defenseman long term. There's still some decision-making woes in his game, and there's definitely some room for refinement. He's not going to be playing NHL minutes right out of the gate when he's drafted, but give him a couple years to marinate, and I think that you have a player that is going to be a coach's favorite, a fan favorite, and playing 22, 23, 24 minutes a night for the next 15 years. That's fantastic value in this range of the draft class. And I think there's a number of teams that'd be interested in that top 10, maybe even in the top 5. I'm not quite sure which team would take that swing in the top 5, whether it might be the Anaheim Ducks, but I think they might be tending more towards a right shot defenseman if Artem Levshunov might be available, or even Zane Parekh if they really go off the board with a right D. But I think Utah would be a really good fit. They love their physical, projectable two-way defenseman. They picked Dmitry Simashev at 6th last year. I think they might pick Sam Dickinson at 6th this year. I think it's a very good fit. It's what their scouts really value. Maybe they go a different route, but if you have Dickinson and Simashev to lock down the left side of your defensive core, you are set long term. If Anton Salayev's available, he might be the guy as well there at 6th, but Dickinson would certainly be an option. The Ottawa Senators at 7th, I think, would adore a guy like Dickinson. Again, left child defense is a bit of an area of strength in that pipeline, especially with Jake Sanderson taking massive strides in his development. But Dickinson plays the game the way the Sens like the game to be played. And especially if Jacob Chychrun gets moved in the offseason and opens up a spot in that defensive core. Yeah, he's a playoff beast, Sam Dickinson. He's so projectable in how he plays the game. And there's so much offense still to be taken out of his game that he could still develop into. The runway there is really intriguing. And lastly, the Seattle Kraken, still kind of figuring out what their draft preferences are. We only have a couple of drafts to work off of right now in order to predict what alley they go down on draft day. But they could use a player like Sam Dickinson to lock down their top pairing long term. I think he'd be a fantastic fit there in Seattle, and he plays the game the way that organization and Ron Francis has like historically valued in prospects and NHL players. But that wraps up this second segment. In the next one, we're going to look at two forwards that are likely going to be picked in that 20 to 40 range, and Jett Luchanko and Brody Ziemer. But first, a quick word from our sponsors here at Locked On NHL Prospects. Alrighty, let's wrap things up here in the final segment with two high motor, very projectable forwards, one center, one winger. Let's start off with the centerman. Jett Luchanko, playing with the Guelph Storm in the OHL, is a player with tremendous athleticism. He just completely dominated all the combine type testing at the CHL Top Prospects game. I'm very excited to see what his numbers look like at the NHL combine. He's a 5'11", 183-pound right shot centerman, and he plays the game with so much versatility and adaptability, and especially a contending team in that 20 range would absolutely love to add a player of this mold to their prospect pool. In 68 games with Guelph, he scored 20 goals and 74 points, and he also played a very important role for Team Canada at the U18 World Championships, logging 2 goals, 7 points in 7 games. He was mainly the third-line center on that team, but he made every single player he played with better in that tournament, whether it be Tij Iginla or Maxime Massé. Doesn't matter. They all played better when they were on Jett Luchanko's line. And he can be so adaptable in the offensive zone and in the neutral zone. He can be a puck rusher. He's a very good skater. He isn't the highest end puck handler in the world, but he's very intelligent with the puck on the stick. He doesn't hold on to the puck for all that long. He likes to keep his puck touches a little bit shorter and really tie the game together with his line mates. He's a true line connector. And in the offensive zone, he gets to the dirty areas. He has a high motor. He's a really good playmaker. He gets the puck to the high danger areas and elevates very good finishers and snipers that he plays with. And there's so much to like in this profile. He brings a ton of defensive value on top of that. He could be a really, really good defensive 3C with playmaking upside. And he also has some second line upside to boot. There's so much to like here. He's a true line elevator, and I've been a big fan of him for the last couple of months, especially. But there's a lot of teams that I think would love a player in this profile, whether it be the Washington Capitals at 17th overall. They always like their players that can just bring a lot of value in a middle six capacity with some level of certainty with their draft slot, or even the New York Islanders are even more up that alley. It's the first round draft pick in a couple years now, and Jett Luchanko would be precisely what Lou Lamoriello values and consistently drafts on draft day. Or even the LA Kings. They could use some more players to fill out their bottom six, play some really important gritty minutes, and also fill in the top six in case of injury. And Jett Luchanko brings all of that to the table. There's so much to like here. I think he's going to be a slam dunk first rounder on draft day. He's not going to fall in the second round. I'd be really, really shocked. But I'm very curious to see which team ends up drafting him. And he could be an NHLer within like 2 years or a year and a half. He is not going to need all that much time because he already plays the game with such an NHL style, and he's so projectable. So very curious to see where he lands on draft day. And last but not least, a player who isn't talked about nearly enough, including on our podcast, Brody Ziemer, the captain of the US NTDP program this season. He's a winger. He's 5'11", 192 pounds. He's a right shot. February 22nd, 06 birthday. And he was a point a game all season long with the program. 27 goals and 70 points in 61 games in all competitions, but he was at his absolute best at the U18 World Championships, scoring 3 goals, 12 points in 7 games on the road to a silver medal for Team USA. And the leadership ability that he brings to the table is of so much value. And beyond that, he's another line elevator. He makes players around him better. He does a lot of that dirty work. He makes the lives of his line mates so much easier. He plays in a system very, very well. His teammates know what to expect of him. But he can also come up with some really big clutch goals from dirty areas. He has a pretty underrated wrist shot. He can score from medium range, and he just consistently gets the puck to his teammates in dangerous positions. I wouldn't call him a pure playmaker by any stretch of the imagination, but he does consistently get the puck to the dangerous areas. Rather than perhaps creating with dynamic skill, he does so in a gritty way, like short passes, keeps his puck touches short, and really, really wants to elevate the higher skill, higher dynamism players that he plays with, which is exactly the kind of player that you are looking for in that late first, early second round range. And while he isn't entirely being ranked in that range just yet, I do think he ends up being picked there. The captain of the program typically does get picked a bit higher than they get ranked. And there's a lot of teams that I think could really like him, especially because he's such a great complementary piece. Organizations that already have a lot of skill in their lineup, but want to get that type of really projectable and like high value NHL middle six type of talent will really want to look in his direction on draft day. I think if we're looking in the first round, it's very much in like that 30 range. The last couple picks of the first round, I think the Philadelphia Flyers could be very interested in a guy like Ziemer, who could even be a complementary piece on a line with a guy like Matvei Michkov in terms of doing a lot of that dirty work and defensive ability that Michkov struggles with. Or even the Winnipeg Jets at 37th overall. They always love the player that can bring these types of skills to the equation. They're going to have Rutger McGroarty coming in very soon now, and Brody Ziemer is going to be developing at the University of Minnesota, which is a strong program. So look at him to really elevate his ability and perhaps explore the offensive creativity and impact a little bit further in the NCAA. And finally, I think that Utah at 38th overall would be another very good fit. That scouting staff really loves their projectable players who do so much of the dirty work. And they already have so much skill in their lineup, from Clayton Keller to Logan Cooley. Having a guy like Brody Ziemer to insulate those types of players a little bit would be really, really useful. But that wraps up our six high risers of the draft cycle, who perhaps were not the highest ranked players earlier on the draft cycle, but especially through late season, like excellent performances, especially in the playoffs and at the U18 World Championships, were able to elevate their draft stocks and are also just very projectable players that NHL teams typically favor more so than public outlets do. I think these are the six players that will be going higher than expected on draft day. But let us know in the comments who your high rises would have been. Let us know who we missed here, because there's so many players and we obviously cannot predict every single high riser. There's going to be some shocks on draft day. It would not be an NHL draft without some level of intrigue and shock. If you're interested in learning more about the players we covered today, we have a full 30-minute scouting report out on all of these guys except for Brody Ziemer. So go check those out. I'll link those here in the cards for you to get easily. And if you're listening on your favorite podcasting platform, make sure to make us your first listen of the day. For your second listen of the day, go check out Locked On Sports Today, a 24-hour news channel with all the sporting information and talk that you could possibly want. And if you're watching on YouTube, make sure to like and subscribe. Please leave us a comment. And tune back in the coming weeks for the rest of our draft coverage. We have so much content coming your way and are very excited to be going to the draft in Las Vegas to bring even more hands-on content for you, the listeners. But that wraps up today's show. I'm Sebastian High, the head scout over at Dobber Prospects, typically joined by Hadi Kalakesh, director of North American Scouting at Dobber Prospects. And we hope you tune back in soon.